Hi, my name is Eddie and this is How to Get Living. Today I'm going to talk about having conversations and particularly how to have an influential conversation where you are having a positive influence on the other person and how the other person is feeling. Okay, here's a very important quote to remember. Long after people forget what you've done, they will remember how you made them feel. And this is a basic principle when it comes to communicating with other people, and this applies in all sorts of areas. Okay, I've got a client that has been working with me to improve his careers, and his career in particular the area of networking with other people and other people in his career, his chosen area of career of employment, and also his relationships, romantic relationships, and of course his career as well, because those are relationship based as well. Okay, and so one of the first things we're going to be doing with that client is building up the skill of having influential conversations, having conversations where the person you're communicating with feels positive about you and positive about that conversation. Okay, so here's the basic model. There's three components to it. The first one is being present. Okay, this is having your mind focused in the present moment, in your body and with the other person. The second one is focusing on emotion, focusing on the emotion of the other person that you are conversing with. And the third one is asking questions. Okay? So to begin with, being present is a very large topic, but essentially what that means is that your mind is focused in the moment. It's not wandering off into the past and thinking about stuff that's happened previously, yesterday or years ago or whatever, and it's not off in the future thinking about what you might be saying next or what the other person is going to say next. Okay, it's about speaking with the other person, listening to hear them, not listening to respond. Okay, it's about not thinking of a cool story to say to them to make them laugh or something like that. It's actually about being very present, being with that other person, okay, and listening very carefully to what that other person is saying. Okay, so you have to be present with the other person. Okay, your mind is not wandering around, looking around you, and what's happening around you. It's not in the past, it's not in the future, it's with the other person. Your focus, your attention is with the other person exclusively. You're listening to them very carefully and fully. Okay, and you're very present in your body. Okay, that's the first part. The second part is responding to the emotional content of what the other person is saying. Okay, so here's a question I get all the time, particularly when I'm doing dating coaching, which is the number one thing I do really. What do I do to keep the conversation going? What do I do if I've run out of topics to talk about? Okay, so that's a very common concern, and it's understandable. But it's really more like a misunderstanding, okay? Because it's impossible to run out of things to talk about if you're focused on the other person and you're paying attention to their emotion. So here's an example. You might ask someone, what do you do for a job? Let's say they are a librarian. I'll just pull that out of the air. So I say, what do you do for a job? I'm a librarian. Okay, the emotional content of the response was kind of negative, kind of sad. It was sort of like boring. I'm a librarian. But you might ask the same person the question, what do you do for a living? Now I'd say, I'm a librarian. It's awesome. Okay, so the emotional content of the response was completely different in that case. It's like excited, interested, maybe even passionate. So when you are conversing with someone, what you want to do is be paying attention to the emotion that they are exhibiting. Pay attention to the feeling that they're having when they give you a response. Okay? And then following that emotion. So you might listen to their response, listen to what someone is saying, and then comment back, go back to the emotion. If in the first case of the example I've just given, I'm a librarian, you might say, well, that sounds a bit boring. Sounds like you're not really that into it. Is that right? Okay, so what I've done there is I've gone to the emotion, because there's an emotion in there, in the context, in the words. Or in the second one, yeah, I'm a librarian, you might focus on the positive emotion, the excitement, the sort of passion. You're really into being a librarian. It sounds cool. What's so good about being a librarian? What makes you interested in it? Okay, so Point number 1, be present. Point number 2, focus on the emotion. Point number 3, ask questions 70-30. What that means is the other person should be speaking at least 70% of the time, and you should be speaking at most 30% of the time. Now, if it swings completely to the point where you're speaking like 1% of the time, that's a problem. That means you're not in the conversation at all. Okay, 99-1 is not appropriate, but we are going for about 70-30. This is like the golden kind of ratio for sales conversations, for dating conversations, okay, and for influential conversations where you are trying to understand the other person, okay, and giving them a positive experience. Now, I have ordered this in order of importance. It sounds like when I'm talking about it, you're hearing me talk about being present with the other person speaking, and that implies that they are speaking 70% of the time, right? 70-30. I'm talking about following the emotional content of what the other person is saying, and I was talking about asking questions like their response, okay? And that's because they're talking 70% of the time, and you're only talking 30% of the time, and a lot of what you're talking about is questions. A lot of what you're saying is questions, okay? So it's presence, emotions, 70-30 questions, okay? And that's the reason I've structured that way, is because that is the order of importance. Everything is founded on you being present. If your mind wanders away, you're not listening. You're not capturing what the other person is saying, okay? If you're not focused on the other person, they can tell that you're not really into what's happening, okay? And you won't be able to pick up their emotions because you're not present with their emotion. You're not focused on the other person, okay? So the order of importance is presence, emotionality, then questions. But the structure of it essentially is asking questions. It's like you could flip it around. Ask a question, pay attention to the emotion of the response, and then be present with the emotion, and then respond to that emotion. Okay, so like in my example, what do you do for a living? What's your job? I'm a librarian. Okay, so there's a question and a response, and there's an emotional content. Then I'm present with the response. Oh, cool. So you're a librarian. Well, what's that like? Do you find that interesting? And then the response to that, yeah, I really enjoy being a librarian. Actually, there's something about it that really works for me, etc., etc. Okay, so this is a very, very simplified overview of the conversational model that I'm talking about, but it has all the essential 3 components. Okay, being present, focusing on emotion, and asking questions. So that the other person is speaking 70% of the time and you're speaking 30% of the time. This is like a framework. As you practice this conversational model over and over, you're going to find that you get better and better at doing it, and your conversations get better and better, and people respond to you more and more and more. Okay, it's not just because you're good at following this model, it's because you will become more and more intentional. You'll learn to focus on the other person. You'll learn to be present. You'll learn to pick up their emotion. Okay, you might be talking with someone and their emotion stays pretty flat, but when you get to a certain topic, it spikes right up. It's positive or it's negative. That's a sign. There's a little flag there waving for you to like focus in on the fact that they have an emotion about a question you just asked or a response they just gave. Okay, so that means it's important to them. And digging into that carefully and being very present with their emotion and their response is going to be very interesting to that other person. You're going to find that you are being influential on them, okay? Because they are wanting to talk to you about it. Everyone wants to be focused on, everyone wants to have their emotions and their needs nurtured and met and accepted. That's a very basic part of the human condition, okay? So this is an extremely powerful tool that you can apply in all kinds of situations. It's very important for having dates. It's very important for dating someone. It's very important for networking in your career, okay, and like speaking to colleagues. It's something that you can practice everywhere. You can practice this all the time, and I encourage you to do it all the time. Practice this everywhere. We meet with strangers in the supermarket, okay, when you're going out shopping, when you bump into someone at an event and you're talking to someone, when you're introduced to a friend through another friend, okay, ask questions, pay attention to the emotion of the other person, be present with them and with their emotion, okay. Be present, pay attention to the emotion, follow the emotion, ask questions, 70-30, They are speaking 70% of the time, you're speaking 30% of the time. Remember that model, commit it to memory, practice it everywhere. It's a very powerful tool. It's going to really improve the quality of your conversations and make you a more influential person to speak to. It's something that you can't fully understand until you start doing it. It's very worth doing though. It's a very good idea. Get into it. Thank you for your time. Please like this video, click on the subscribe button and click the little bell so you get a notification when I upload. I do appreciate your attention and you coming to my channel. Please comment below if you've got any questions or anything you want to talk about or comment on. My name is Eddie and this is How to Get Living.